are you? Good afternoon. It is Monday, December 4th, 2017. The time is 3:30 p.m. This is the time for the Transportation Commission regular meeting. And we'll call the roll. Tracy Hopkins.
Here.
Ryan Lancaster.
Here.
Stephen Lewis.
Here.
Allard is here. Brent Konsacek. Absent. Brian Leslie.
Here.
Ryan Hall.
Here.
Britton Davis.
Here.
Erica Bowen.
Here.
Luke Kavanagh.
He's here.
Well, marking present. Sean Martin. Absent for the time being. Tony Tisdale.
Here.
Anna Jobert.
Here.
Miranda Carson.
Here.
And we have Mr. Baird as counsel joining us. Anyone else to acknowledge? Item 2 is the adoption of the agenda. Any discussion? Additions, deletions?
I make a motion, we adopt the agenda as is.
Mr. Hopkins has moved to adopt. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second the move.
Second by Mr. Lancaster. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. Item 3 is approval of minutes from the November 6, 2017 meeting. You had an opportunity to review those. Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the November meeting minutes.
Do
I second it.
Do I have a second? So I have a motion by Mr. Lancaster and a second by Mr. Hopkins to adopt the minutes as drafted. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I will go ahead and sign those. Item 4, old business items, transportation projects, update. Mr. Hood.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this month's update on transportation projects begins on page 6 in your agenda packet. I don't have too terribly much to report right now. We're kind of in the middle of a new fiscal year for most departments and entering winter time, but I do have a couple projects that I wanted to update you on. Maybe just a note first on page 6, the first couple projects there. This is the last time you'll see those two projects in this update. They were deemed substantially complete over a month ago, so I'm going to take them out of the list, but the Franklin and U-Stick projects are done, so I'm going to take them off. They've been in this packet for months now, but with them wrapping up, doesn't seem appropriate to have them in here anymore. And then on page 7, I just wanted to call to your attention the 10 Mile Road McMillan to Chinden project. I went to a project kickoff meeting last week at ACHD. A little bit on this, and some of it is still TBD, but ACHD is beginning to design this project, which basically is between Walmart and Chinden on 10 Mile there. There's next down to the 2-lane roadway, kind of in between Heroes Park. ACHD is also in discussions. I don't even think they're at negotiations at this point, but there's potential that another entity would actually build this project for the highway district. If development goes through, they would need it to be actually constructed before 2022 when it's in ACHD's plans. So we'll see how that actually plays out, but I just wanted to make you aware that ACHD is beginning design. Groundwater really seems to be the main concern right now. There's high groundwater out in that area. They're not quite sure what they're going to do with all the runoff. So Let's see, then moving on to page 8 then. Just again, I highlighted this next month, but I wanted to do it again this month. Pine Avenue, Meridian to Locust Grove is on the 90-day bid list this month, and they envision that going into construction here early next year, which is just next month. So I'm not saying it'll go into construction next month, but it may. But 2018 is upon us. So I just wanted to, again, point that out. That's the project here from downtown to Locust Grove Road. I did update some of the other projects. Erica sent me some information on the Eagle Road signal equipment upgrades on page 9. So I hope that is current now. I summarized that project description there. We talked about that last month. And then the last item in the memo on page 10 that's bold, which again is the new information, we'll talk about here as one of your new, although it's a recurring agenda item to talk about priorities, but put it there as well, the ECHD integrated 5-year work plan. So we'll begin that later on. And with that, like I said, I don't have too terribly much. So I won't belabor this report any further unless there's any questions or comments. Mr. Chair.
Any questions for Mr. Hood? I have one. Mr. Hood, on Pine Avenue, Meridian to Locust Grove, maybe clarify if it's going out on a 90-day bid list for December, does that mean there's 90 days within which to bid?
No, Mr. Chair, they typically don't leave them open that long. This one, I'm not quite sure how long it's going to be on the streets. About a month, though. I mean, something like that. And they'll review and have the bid opening. I don't have that calendar in front of me, but no, it's not actually out to bid for 90 days.
I'm just curious, and I should know if they start construction in 18, there's at least one water course.
Right.
The canal that crosses towards Locust Grove. Would that be tackled first?
Mr. Chair, exactly. Yeah, that's why early 2018 is when this project essentially has to start, so they can do the irrigation work before the water starts to flow. So yeah, that needs to be done while those canals and creeks and other ditches are empty.
Any other questions for Mr. Hood? Okay, that completes item 4, old business. Item 5, new business. 5A, Meridian Police Department status, Sergeant Arnold. Good to see you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Glad to be here. That means it's a pretty slow day in Meridian.
That's
really-
a good day.
Slow days are good days.
So, yeah, so they say. I just cursed myself. The only thing that I really have is the new construction on Franklin between 10 Mile and Black Cat. We're getting a lot of complaints of speeding. I probably had 3 or 4 different phone calls about the speeding in the area. The people that are working in the area are complaining about the cars that are speeding. We've recently just caught a guy going 70-some miles an hour down the road. So backing up a little bit on Franklin between 10 Mile and Linder, we have one section of Franklin that's a 45-mile-an-hour zone, and then pretty much everything else is a 40 zone. And looking at that and talking with the other guys on the traffic team, we'd like to see that 45 zone change to a 40 zone so it's consistent all the way through. And we don't have that 1 mile of westbound traffic that's going 45, and they're probably going closer to 50. And then they hit that 40 zone thinking that they're still in the 45 zone, even though it's signed 40. And they're still continuing on at 50, 52, 53 miles an hour, and see if we can do something about the speeds that we're seeing out there. There's a lot of housing that's planned on going in out there. I seen the other day that today, they've cut roads in, a substantial number of roads for some housing that's going in out there, and it looks like it's a Corey Barton type subdivision. So I'd imagine they'll go up pretty fast, and that area will fill quickly, kind of increasing that traffic, and we'd like to get ahead of the speed problem, especially on that 1 mile stretch between 10 Mile and Black Cat before it becomes a problem. So that's kind of where we're at as far as the police department goes this month.
Does he get a double fine for speeding in a construction zone?
There is an enhanced penalty for speeding in a construction zone, but it's not signed as a construction zone anymore. So it's just a normal 40-mile-an-hour zone out there. There's another enhanced penalty for speeding 16 or more over the speed limit, which increases it to a $155 fine, and it raises it from a 3-point citation to a 4-point citation for insurance purposes. But that doesn't seem to really deter a lot of people, especially when you see them with pages and pages of traffic tickets. I've kind of come to the assumption that some people, it's just a fact of life. It's just a way of doing business for them.
Anything else for Sergeant Arnold?
Are you currently working with ACHD to address that speed limit?
I was actually hoping Sean would be here and he could kind of hear my pitch, but I haven't brought it up with them yet.
So, Mr. Commissioner,
Mr. Lancaster?
or Chairman, I should say, yeah. Sergeant Arnold, so that was on, repeat that again, on Franklin between 10 Mile and Black Cat, is that?
So Franklin between Linder and 10 Mile is a 45
Linder,
mile an hour
right.
zone. It's the only 45 mile an hour zone that's in Meridian on Franklin, and it's a 1 mile stretch. Everything else is 40 miles an hour with the exception of kind of Gaudians to the east, which is more Boise than it is Meridian anyways, and they're still 45. But from Eagle Road pretty much all the way to Black Cat is all 40 with the exception of that one stretch that's 45 between Linder and 10 Mile. And our goal is to get the westbound traffic slowed down before they get to that area. So we keep them at a consistent 40 miles an hour, which we all know people are probably going to push 45 anyways, but.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd be, at the sergeant's suggestion, I'd be open to asking ACHD to either review their speed study there or to conduct one on the city's behalf.
What do we need to do to get that request before Mr. Martin, Mr. Lancaster? And I'm wondering, being as how it's
Wait till he's
recently
here.
completed.
Yeah, wait till he's here.
Wait till he's here and ask him.
Being as how it's recently completed and constructed, and there's going to be a fair amount of construction equipment on both sides of Eagle. Going both, you've got a fair amount of construction going there
On Franklin?
on Franklin. Yeah, on, just to the east of Eagle and then west all the way
Okay.
through is, they've broken a lot of ground there now that the pavement's in. Will that be hands-off during construction? Don't know.
Well, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to do a speed study while there's irregular traffic patterns like a work zone, but it could be appropriate to ask for a review or a new study when, you know, when it's, when ACHD deems it appropriate, I guess.
Mis-
We do to support you, Sergeant.
You know, I was actually hoping that Sean would be here and he would have a little more insight into where we go from here. You know, it's,
Just a matter of asking.
Is that something you do before the next meeting, hoping that he
well,
appears?
you know, I can call ACHD and schedule the speed study. That's not a big deal. Typically in the past, it's just been a phone call to John Wasson and he sets it up and sends the information back. But actually getting beyond that step where we actually start talking about, you know, hey, we are seeing a lot of the high speeds or you know, whatever the case may be, where we go from after the speed study, I'm not sure where we go or what we do with that information.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hopkins?
I'd be curious to see a speed study on that road. Anyway, I bet you 85 percentile would be 45 miles an hour all through that area. And we're there all the time, and that's about kind of what.
You know, and I can give you the Stacy speed study, and that's me driving up and down the road 3 or 4 times a day with the radar on. And I think you're absolutely right. I think it would be easily 85 or 90% is 45 to 47 miles an hour from probably midway between Locust Grove and Eagle all the way out to the west. And that's both east and westbound traffic.
Your jurisdiction goes how far west?
Black Cat.
About Black Cat.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Leslie?
so Eagle Road, pardon me, Franklin east of Eagle is all 45, isn't it?
It's all 45.
So
And that-
why in Meridian does it drop to 40 for the most part? Out of curiosity.
I have no idea. Yeah, and now that you mentioned, I think it is 45 clear through Boise down towards Maple Grove
Yeah.
and that area.
As soon as it hits Meridian limit, it drops to 40.
Mr. Chair, if I can, kind of tie in a couple of different things together. One is, it's been a while, but, so I want to just refresh your memory. This is one of your charges, is to work with ACHD on any speed limit changes. So that is one of the 7 or 8 charges that you have, to make recommendations to City Council or work with ACHD on making changes to speed limits. The other thing, and again, it's been some time, but ACHD has a map that shows the speed limits basically in Ada County. We wouldn't want it all the way through Ada County, but we could look at the couple of miles kind of coming into Meridian and look at that for consistency and inconsistency. I know Locust Grove, for example, what used to be, 50, 35, 40, 35, like every mile it would change, and some consistency in that. So I guess I could offer up in the next month or so, working with, and I don't know how, urgent this change request is. So if it is, then we can kind of the back end of that. But get a map that shows the speed limits on all the arterials, and you can look at that, and all of us together can say, hey, why does it drop down 5, or why does it go up 5 and then back down 5? It's consistency, those types of things. The other thing, just to refresh, and I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes, but it's been some time, but got a little flack about a year ago probably, because this is the job of the commission, of just saying, go forth and do stuff. We want to hear all this stuff. And it wasn't this same topic, speed limits, but it was, hey, we like things to be vetted through us. And if the discussion you just had was being vetted through, I'm fine with that. But if you want to hear back the speed study and make a recommendation on this thing, that's kind of what you asked for about a year ago. So again, if you're comfortable with just saying, hey, if police has a problem, they want to work with ACHD, you're comfortable, I'm comfortable too. I just wanted to sort of refresh your memory on that. One final thing before I turn the mic back over. And this has to do with Sean not being here, and I apologize, I didn't know this was going to come up, or because he actually asked, should he have John Wasson attend? I'm like, this agenda, I think you're going to be okay this week not attending, so that's my bad for not asking him to send a replacement. But he did also note that item 5D, he would like your input on that item as well before they move forward and look at that a little bit further as well. So, Mr. Chair, I can either wait and give that presentation if Sergeant Arnold's going to hang out, or jump into that too while he's up there and put him on the spot a little bit with what they're seeing and hearing out there and how they would feel about any speed limits. But I know there's a bunch of different related but unrelated things that I just threw out there. So,
Well, I would say go forth, except I was going to ask Mr. Lancaster to make a motion for the commission to send a letter to ACHD requesting a speed study.
Mr. Chairman, is this what I get for opening my mouth? Yeah.
No,
Well,
I'm trying to put it, I'd make the motion myself, but
Oh, okay.
that might be a little presumptuous.
well, if I can offer just a little bit of commentary first, Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate Sergeant Arnold about, you're bringing this to us, and we want to be supportive of anything that you bring to us like this. And like Caleb says, I at least appreciate, being involved in these kinds of discussions. So I appreciate that. I myself, speaking for myself, not for the rest of the commission, but I want to be involved in some of the things that happen in the city, but I don't want to be just another, cog in the bureaucracy that holds things up either. So, with that said, I appreciate, what you brought with this issue of speed limits here for Franklin Road. So, but I do have another issue or question for you in a minute, but I'll take Chairman Ballard up and say, Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission draft a letter on behalf of, or at least referencing, a request from the Meridian Police for ACHD to review their speed studies or to conduct a speed study on Franklin Road in the vicinity of Linder to 10 Mile.
What I had in mind. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Comment, Mr. Hood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the maker of the motion just be okay if the format of that letter be in the form of an email to ACHD on behalf of the commission instead of a more formal letter, if I just engage Sean and ask him to do that on your behalf in an email?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hood, that's fine with me. I didn't want to be as formal as a motion till the chairman twisted my arm anyway, so yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lewis?
I'd like to offer a minor amendment. Mr. Lancaster said Linder to 10 Mile. I'd like to offer Linder to Black Cat, if that's okay with the originator.
I'm fine with that, yes.
Okay. And I think that's, you captured it, that, not that Sergeant Arnold needed us to wag his tail any further, but I think to say that we support that or in conjunction with. And I appreciate you fleshing that out. So we've got a motion with an amendment. I assume that the second goes with that.
Second, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Vinton, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good.
All right.
We'll see if two shouts help.
Mr. Chairman, I have
Lancaster.
one other question that I want to ask Sergeant Arnold before we move on, if that's okay.
Let's not forget Mr. Hood's.
Oh, well, yeah, that too, but can I ask mine first? Okay. So last month, and it's in our meeting minutes, so Mr. Baird's colleagues and he brought an issue before the commission that we weren't able to ask you last month. And I saw the email from Mr. Baird's office after our commission meeting, so that it would have been helpful to me if we'd seen that earlier. I thought, no, it's okay. So it was in regards to the pedestrian hybrid beacon right outside the doors here at, right over here at Meridian and Broadway. And I guess my question to you is what's your experience with that from a enforcement and just, eyes on the road kind of?
So we have received several complaints from people that work at City Hall, which is most of the people that are using that, about cars not stopping for the light. We've had motor officers over here. I don't want to say on a regular basis, but it's gotten quite a bit of attention from them, and they have the same opinion that I do. It's not fixing the problem. The problem is that people are disregarding the lights, and they flat blow through them, whether they want to just disregard the red light, or they don't understand what a red light means, or the flashing red lights that they still have to stop before they can go again. I'm not sure how that works. We're actually going to start a program where we're going to have somebody in civilian clothes crossing the crosswalks, and not just this one, but it's all over town at these hawk lights. It's not just specific to this one that people are running. It's literally every one that we have up, people are disregarding almost every cycle of the light. The only good part of that is when there's a police car, they're pretty good about it. But we want to put somebody in plain clothes with motor officers at both ends and start calling out license plates and vehicles and have them stop them as the officer in plain clothes is trying to make his way back and forth across the street, and see if that helps. See if the flashing lights kind of reminds people that, hey, I need to stop for these things. A lot of the people are continuing on their same routes every day, and maybe it will remind them that I have to stop for that thing when there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, even if they're not in my lane anymore. They still have the right of way all the way through the crosswalk. It's not, use them as a traffic cone and see how close you can get to them to get to work, things like that. So, yeah, we understand there's definitely a problem, and like I said, it's not just this one, but it's all over town, and we're ready to try something new, try some new enforcement tactics and see if it helps.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Leslie.
So Sergeant Arnold, is there any sort of educational outreach that we can do with the community? Because hawk signals aren't popular in other parts of the country.
One of the things that, I can't remember if I brought it up with this commissioner or if it was someone that I talked with ACHD, but one of the things that I would really like to see is signage on the pole itself where you push the button across the walk that says, even though you have the right of way, look for cars, because they're not looking for you, and see if that helps. We've had kids hit in the crosswalk at Todd and Cherry. We've had kids hitting the crosswalk over here by Mountain View High School. We've had kids hit over off of 10 Mile and I can't think of the name of that street right off the top of my Park Creek. You know, these are all signalized crosswalks that they're getting hit in. And granted, they have the right of way, but they got to watch for cars too. You know, so it's not just the education of the cars, but it's also the education of the pedestrians too. And granted, the pedestrians have the right of way, but just that friendly reminder that says, you know, be careful when you're going across the road, because people drop their coffee, people aren't paying attention, and people are talking on the phones, and people don't understand what these lights are for. They don't get that there's people crossing the road right here, and they'll run you over. So be careful.
I know that some of the kids too don't know how to use a crosswalk. They see the crosswalk and they think they can just cross. So I do think some bigger signs on there that even say something like, don't forget to push the button and wait for to see no cars, or something that's more obvious to the kids. Because I know we've had one hit this year, and I think we had one or two hit last year.
Now, that's a good point, Ms. Carson, because just from my personal observance, there's a crosswalk and people walk, and they're not even looking, and I'm stopped. They don't even know I'm stopped. And if I can follow up on that and tag on Mr. Leslie, I just read on one of my blogs about making a right on a red light. There's no traffic coming, and you run over a bike that's passing you on the right-hand side.
And that just happened a couple weeks ago, I think.
And so I don't know how you get the education out other than some advertisements that you got to be really careful. So whatever effort you can make. Did you have an additional follow-up, Mr. Leslie?
I did, I had a follow-up. So maybe Caleb knows. So I know ACHD and the City of Meridian, they use Nextdoor as a means of communication. Do you guys do email as well? Just sort of educational outreach? I'm thinking this might be something that's good. You know, people are not familiar with these hawk crossings. They don't know what they're supposed to do. The sign's kind of small, you know, the print is kind of small. Maybe we could do some sort of outreach.
Mr. Chair, we do have, as was just stated, we do have Nextdoor. We do have also a distribution list, actually probably different distribution lists of emails for people. So again, if that's something, I think that if that's what the commission wants to do, a motion with a second, I can run it up to city council and just, you know, make sure they're good with the messaging there and what that wants to be. Kind of in those same veins, I'm just going to ballpark 5 years ago, because that's when they started to kind of be popular or thereabouts. I don't remember exactly when ACHD started to put them up. But I do remember that they did a pretty intense public outreach education campaign then. But that's been, again, some number of years now at this point. Trying to get people, and they still do have some information they're trying to get out there. I see things all the time, not all the time, on occasion, that talk about, you know, flashing red versus solid and the yellow, and, you know, what phases actually mean. Just quite honestly, and I'm not trying to get out of anything necessarily, but I do think ACHD is probably the best avenue to do that outreach. Mainly because they already have the education materials. If they want help distributing that, I think that is something that the city could help to do, not recreate a new message, but help to, you know, maybe we put it in a flyer that goes out with utility billing information, you know, those types of things I think we could work, or an email or whatever. But working in concert with ACHD on, you know, something that's pretty short and sweet that we can include in the various medium that we use to get the word out on things. Facebook, we also have Facebook, that maybe the Parks Department, that seems to be kind of a natural tie-in. I do know that the mayor's office is trying to be more and more aware of what they send out to people, so they aren't spamming people with just unrelated topics, so just using the wealth of information and the context they have for just all kinds of information. To me, again, there could be a tie-in either, and police does too. Police has a social media, gets things out on Facebook and Nextdoor. So parks and police kind of, to me, are kind of a natural, you could at least see the tie-in there with the information. But again, if the commission wants me to run that up the ladder and send it out to everybody we know, we could potentially do that.
Can I ask a question, Ms. Carson? And I don't think the school has responsibility to teach our kids everything, but is there some effort to remind the children when they're walking to school?
So we do partner with Safe Routes to School, and they do some educational outreach in the schools. It's based on a school-by-school basis. We give them the opportunity to kind of book those speakers, and they book them if they want to. We don't make the schools book those. I'm not sure how many do it because it's not run through my department. I do think that the flyers that ACHD already has, if we could get our hands on those, I think it's something that I could easily send out to schools, just a media file, and say, if you feel like a lot of your students walk, like Willow Creek, Paramount, schools that have very high walkers. If you feel like a lot of your kids walk, or you have a call light on a busy intersection like Lowell Scott, you may want to send this flyer out. And we do all our flyers electronically now, so it wouldn't be very difficult to ask them, who do you want us to send a flyer to, or do you want to send a flyer yourself?
Do you have any room on your plate to add that item?
I can definitely add that and talk to my communications team about it.
Okay.
I don't think it would be an issue to do it. We also have a spotlight, about once a week. One of our communications gals writes an article. She does a great job. We've just started that, doing highlights. I think that would be a great highlight too. We have a large percentage of walkers. So.
Well, I'd appreciate that extra effort if you would do that.
Yeah, definitely. But like Caleb said, I don't see the point in creating anything from scratch. So if we can get something that ACHD's already created and just share that, that would make the effort a lot as well.
You bet, you bet. Any other points of discussion? Mr. Hood, did we get back to your comment, or are we still holding off on that comment that you asked to address?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have a new business item, so I don't know, again, if Sergeant Arnold needs to leave, I would ask, I didn't know he's going to bring that up, so if he needs to go, which I understand, if the commission wouldn't mind moving 5D up and we just piggyback to get his take, or if he's going to hang out and go through the next two items with us and then do 5. Either way is good with me. I will just circle back on his main thing and just let you know I'm not going to delay. I will tomorrow send, maybe even tonight, send Sean and John and copy you the request for that speed study that they just.
That'd be great.
So that's why I didn't want to do a letter. I want to get this out as quickly as possible. Anyways, and then, yeah, 5D, at your pleasure.
Well, it's all the same. Why don't we bump it up and get him back there to his slow day?
Before we do that, Mr. Chairman,
Rock.
and it's kind of in our packet too, the new light at 10 Mile and Vanguard, have you seen that?
I have.
And do you have any opinions about that? That looks too close to me to the interchange, and I can see them backing them up on the,
I think time will tell as that area starts to build and you start seeing more and more cars. Lucky for me, I guess it's the one green light that I can always count on making, whether I'm going north or south. But yeah, I haven't been out there yet to see what traffic is like, or even in the late afternoon.
early yet,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I think this time next year, we might see some congestion from that. It just depends on how it's regulated and how they keep traffic moving, to the south that's trying to get on the freeway. And
I just see that backing up down onto the interstate off-ramp
I hope
right
not.
there. I was just curious. I know it's a little early, but it'd be something I'd be curious to keep an eye on and see what happens there. So, thank you.
All right.
So 5A, and with consensus, we're going to take up 5D. Mr. Hood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So last week at council, there was a project. I don't know that. Yeah, I'll go ahead and pull this up real quick.
What was 5D? Or
5D,
Or the
as
one-
in
the one
dog,
we
speed
talked about.
limits on Lake Hazel and Eagle Roads.
Okay.
So last week, there was a project on near the northwest corner of Eagle and Victory. And there were several people that came and testified about the speed limit, mainly on Lake Hazel. It's 50, and I recognize the city. So this is basically right, the city's building a new 77-acre park on the south side of Lake Hazel. It's that neighborhood, basically. So it's county right now. Most of it's county, but the city limits are starting to encroach, if you will, or expand that way. So people came to this hearing wanting to talk about both the speed limit on, and there's some topography changes there as you approach the intersection at Eagle Road on Lake Hazel Road. And comments about dogs being hit and mailboxes are on the opposite side, so people having to cross the roadway, and it's 50 miles an hour. And they'd even requested that police have more of a presence out there from time to time. I won't get into all the testimony that was made, but, you know, obviously resources are stretched thin, and this is just even on the boundary of the city limits, and most of it's still in the county, so I don't know how much time Meridian Police were spending out there versus the Sheriff's Department. But on the Eagle Road leg, certainly more and more of that. You know, there's a YMCA now, and the Hill Century Farm Project, and Sky Mesa, and Black Rock, and more city on Eagle Road. But both of them are speed limit's 50 right now, and it's urbanizing. So the question really was, or the comments to the council were about that speed limit. So they just asked me to take that to this group and say, hey, kind of same thing with the last one. Can ACHD look into the speed limit and the Transportation Commission evaluate that to see if it's appropriate or not to drop the speed limit down from 50 miles an hour, basically in that map, but I didn't even zoom into it, in that area between near Eagle Road and Lake Hazel. Me too, I can be quiet and work on the map, but that's essentially the request. And then again, when Sean saw that on the agenda, he said, we can look into it, but curious to see what Meridian Police think.
Out in that area, I really don't have a lot of traffic experience, probably because it is a very small section of it that's city right now, and we don't have a lot of crashes out there. I haven't heard of any complaints of speed out in that area, so really I don't have a lot of input as far as that area. I'm familiar with where the park's going. I'm familiar with the big drip in the road. I think it's just to the east of where the park's going. You come back up and it's, you know, with the park there, it could easily be a surprise to somebody who's trying to cross the road, or a dog gets out, or traffic backs up from the stop sign. Last summer, we had a soccer tournament in the springtime, and that was one of our concerns was, as they're transitioning between the games, when you have all of your people at the park and all of your people coming into the park and where they're gonna park their cars at, and that dip in the road, and as they come back up, are they going to be surprised by people pulling back out from where the soccer fields were at, and things like that. But you know, as luck would have it, it went off without a hitch, and we didn't have any issues.
Mr. Chair, I've got the map up now. I apologize that it wasn't up before. This is the general vicinity of the people that brought up some of the complaints, although some of them were in Black Rock as well. Again, there's some topography issues in this area. The color is city limits, but you can see parcel lines as well. So these are city subdivisions, and again, the new YMCA and the city park here, and then there's the 77-acre park going to construction this next year here. So again, it's basically this area here between Amity and Lake Hazel on Eagle, and between Eagle and Locust Grove on Lake Hazel in that 50 mile an hour. And again, for consistency, I imagine it's 50 back further to the west, but these people were concerned the project was going in here, so they were concerned about the speed limits there. So it's fair that we don't have a whole, at least you personally aren't familiar with that. I don't know if there's anybody else in traffic or the department that would be any more familiar with that, or the next month. I don't think there's anything urgent where we need to react necessarily or act, but again, I told the mayor and council that I would at least bring it up and we'd look into it to see if 50 is still appropriate.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Hopkins?
So I drive that section of road. I don't drive Lake Hazel a whole lot, so I don't know what that's like, but Eagle Road from Amity headed south flows perfect, and headed north. I mean, it's not congested. Seems pretty, the worst thing is people pulling out, if they're not paying attention, out of those subdivisions because people are moving 50 miles an hour on it. But I've not seen any close calls or anything. But sometimes sometimes instead of taking a left and crossing traffic, you just go right and around and down Meridian Road. So it seems to flow good to me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if I can, just real quick to kind of paint a picture of some of the testimony. That was a concern, because again, a lot of the people were in the Black Rock subdivision, Sky Mesa, and trying to merge into traffic on Eagle when people are going 50, 55 miles an hour here. That was their concern, was getting up to speed. And even some of the folks, the newer subdivision here, but just, they weren't complaining about the traffic flow. It was,
Yeah.
and potential rear ends turning into their subdivisions, those types of comments, the speed discrepancies, so.
Now Eagle Road headed north from that spot gets a lot worse.
Yeah.
A lot more dangerous, a lot more congestion, a lot more kids, buses, people pulling out, and people trying in a hurry, but out there till they get more people, I think it's,
Mr. Chair,
flows good.
Ms. Carson?
that they're also putting a crosswalk in that intersection for, not for our students will still be riding the bus for the foreseeable future, but because they are putting the YMCA there, and it's a library, and it's got a medical clinic there on site, they wanted the neighborhoods to have access, so I believe that they're looking at putting a crosswalk in right there.
Is there going to be a street light there, or stoplight there eventually?
It's a hot light.
Hawk light?
That's what I believe that's true.
So a little more information on that. So this is Taconic. They're actually putting a roundabout in there, and then they'll have the signal on the south side of that leg. And that is being done basically in concert with Brighton, mainly, as Miranda just said, the YMCA and those types of things there. I think the pedestrian signal goes in, but they're also, again, putting a roundabout in here, and that got a lot of discussion at another public hearing when this property was coming in for entitlements. Also, this intersection in Amity is being designed, it's always been designed for dual lane, but that will be accelerated, and then the widening of Eagle Road, I believe in 2019 or 2020, the next year or two anyways, that's supposed to be widened. So, yeah, there are multiple improvements, including the widening of Eagle Road between this new roundabout and the upgraded dual lane roundabout. So it's a little bit different situation having a roundabout with a pedestrian signal, and Mr. Cavender's here, and I believe he was at that public hearing. So if you want any more feedback or input on the roundabout at Taconic with the, I think one of the council members even Google searched dual lane roundabouts and hawk signals or something and came up with a picture that was like a 5-legged weird intersection with, so improvements, yes. I don't know how much of an improvement it will be when it, talk about a learning curve and educating the people on how to use it. It's going to be interesting to see. And again, that pedestrian signal should be up and running though before the roundabout, but there's definitely concerns about how stacking will work into the roundabout.
I think at this point, we just add on to that email you're sending to ACHD and just ask for a speed study in that area at this point. So that's my recommendation.
Any comment to Mr. Hall's request to augment the email?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's fine. I think it's an appropriate thing for this, commission to do, to request speed studies or other things of, of ACHD or ITD. So I think that part's fine. I guess a little bit of commentary from me is I think we need to be very careful in how we word things, that when we request a speed study or an engineering study like that, that we're requesting just that. We're not biasing it by requesting, it should be higher or it should be lower, or, what we're asking for is we're asking for, an evaluation, an objective evaluation we're not asking for, you know, so that the recommendation could be the speed limit's too low on Franklin, for instance. You know, if we ask the question, we should be open to whatever the answer is, so.
Fair enough. Anything else, Ms. Carson?
Can I ask Caleb a question? Is that roundabout a done deal?
Mr. Chair, I don't know about a done deal. It is being done, again, the developer's kind of leading that with ACHD input. So I don't know what kind of feedback or impact we could have on that potentially. So I would say it's not a done deal, but it's definitely moving that way. So I would contact ACHD and see exactly where that's at in their process. Mr. Chair, can I just follow up a little bit, just for
Sure.
maybe consistency? I can piggyback the email, but maybe a motion in a second is appropriate, just to, again, have some consistency there. And then I just wanted to clarify too, maybe in just the direction, are they two different things? If the Franklin speed limit is okay, are you guys comfortable? Or in this email, do you want me to say, and please don't change anything until that, you know, that data is shared back with the commission on both? Just one or the other, or, so I guess that's some of the clarification I need from you all in that. If you don't want to do a motion, I don't want to get all, but it does kind of seem appropriate to me that if you made a motion on one and amend it, so.
Well, yeah, parliamentary, I just kind of jammed that through, so we have a done deal to send an email requesting a speed study on Franklin between
Linder and
Black
Black
Cat
Cat.
and
Linder.
Linder. So, and an objective, just requesting a speed study. So, despite myself, Mr. Lancaster, I'll ask you to make a second motion, this speed study on Eagle and the Lake Hazel question.
That's what I move, yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Specifically, Lake Hazel, Eagle to Cloverdale, and Eagle Road on from Lake Hazel to Amity. So 2-mile stretch there.
Okay,
And Mr. Chairman, I guess I'll clarify that. In my original motion, I did say a review or speed study, because if they've done a speed study there in the last year, then, you know, I'm not asking for the same work to be done over and over and over again. So kind of review or speed study. So review previous studies or new speed study.
okay.
To answer Caleb's question too, I personally would rather have speed limit stay the same until we see those speed studies, so.
All right, so the motion is to request a review or a speed study on Lake Eagle Road between Amity and Lake Hazel,
Yes.
okay?
As well as Lake Hazel between Eagle and Cloverdale.
Mr. Chair.
Cloverdale, Locust Grove.
Locust Grove.
Thank you.
Wrong direction.
Yeah.
Okay? We have a second for that, I take it.
I seconded that, yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Mr. Arnold,
Thank
or
you.
Sergeant Arnold, thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
coming
Thank you.
today. See you next month.
Thank you.
All right.
And Mr. Chairman, so Commissioner Hall did mention this, but, so are we going to have a report back to this commission? Is that, yeah. Again, to follow up on Caleb's question, I don't know if you got a response to that.
I didn't.
So, Mr. Chair, maybe I can respond. I'm going to put that in my email. I guess we don't really control that. I mean, if ACHD goes out there and changes speed limit signs, there's not a lot we can do about that, but I can request it in my email. Before you change any of it, we'd like to hear, either share your review of the existing study or the new ones you've done before you make any changes. But
Yeah, I think that's great. I don't think any of it is, you know, so critical or pressing that it can't wait a couple weeks, so.
All right, fair enough. Have we completed item 5D? Okay. Now we'll go back to item 5B, annual report to City Council So, Mr. Hood has drafted for Mr. Lewis's and my review a proposed history, and that's also set out in today's agenda. So then I would add, and Mr. Lewis and I saw this about 10 days ago. Anything to add, comment, discuss on the proposed annual report as proposed with Mr. Hood? And again, Mr. Hood, I appreciate your efforts in drafting that. Okay. So I take it then, Mr. Lewis, I guess I can't prevail upon you because you're kind of in the pecking order there, so I'll have to ask someone else to make a motion to approve the draft.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the draft as written for the annual report to City Council.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Hopkins to approve the draft as presented. Is there a second?
I second it.
Mr. Davis, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hey, where do I sign, Mr. Hood?
Mr. Chair, if you'd like to sign a version, I can print one out for you to sign before the presentation. So if I can, just one more minute before we move on to the next
You bet.
agenda item. So next month, I anticipate having an actual date that this report will verbally be shared with the city council. I put it in the memo. Historically, that's been the chair or vice chair that comes and does that. So I assume that will be the case in probably in February, but I'll bring a date for certain as soon as I hear back from the clerk and we share this report. He'll assign a date to me and I'll coordinate probably with you two first and see who can do that, based on availability, who can come. I know Commissioner Ballard's been there at least a couple of years, and
Yeah, I could tell Mr. Lewis about the disappearing act at the last meeting.
Yeah. That's pretty poor.
No. God willing, the creek doesn't rise, I'll be there.
Okay.
5B, we're good to go. 5C, transportation priorities memo from Mr. Hood.
thank you again, Mr. Chair. As alluded to in my project update, a portion of the meeting today, we received a letter on November 9th from Director Wong at ACHD notifying us that they are about to begin work on the FY 2019 to 2023 integrated five-year work plan. And as you all are all aware, we are charged with coming up with a draft list of transportation priority projects for first the council to consider and endorse, and then we share that with our transportation agencies for them to consider as they go into their programming processes. So this meeting, I just really wanted to get that on your radar, letting you know that we have until, so we got to back into that a little bit. March 16th is the deadline for the council to send their requests to ACHD and their priority lists. So by your February meeting, we need to have that done so I can spend at least, the remainder of February and the first week or two of March, if necessary, with council getting their the final version of priorities done. So there is an attached letter that I mentioned that the director signed and some attachments. So today, I wasn't quite sure how much time the other agenda items were going to take. But today, I just would like to hand some information out to you. And over the next 30 days or so, and we'll talk about that here in a minute too, have you begin to think about any changes up or down, adding new priorities to the existing list we have. Last year we had Ryan Head from ACHD attend and kind of do his spiel on what they need and what they do and all that. And aside from our youth commissioner, we're largely the same. So I didn't think that was probably appropriate to have him do that dog and pony show again this year, although I do appreciate it. But I think you all are pretty familiar with what's needed of you at this point in time, so kind of bypass that. If you do have questions, though, about this, please feel free to reach out to me or whatever, and I can fill in any gaps, hopefully, or get you in the contact with the right person that can. So again, today I have several handouts that I want to give to you in hopes that you can review that in the coming weeks and come back to our meeting next month. And we'll talk about up or down, and I'm going to do the same. Historically, and quite frankly, if I had more time before this meeting today, I would have probably had something for you to say, hey, this one's getting a lot of talk. I'm hearing a lot of things about this. What do you guys think about moving this up 2 or 3 spots or whatever? But I just didn't have the time. So, but I'll do the same thing and I'll kind of compile that. So also, if you want to, if you can, the week before your meeting, send me any comments you have and I'll compile those and come up with kind of a hybrid list for us to discuss during our January meeting, including the comments I have to date of, hey, move this one up, move that one down type of a thing. So hope that approach is okay. But again, that gives us not only today to kind of get oriented in our feet about us and maybe even run through some of these lists if you'd like to see where we're at today, and then January and February if needed, to kind of finalize those lists. So just a quick refresher, and it's in the memo, but we need 3 lists basically. The biggest one being roadways and intersections, and those are on one list. The next list is community programs projects. So those are your sidewalk projects, those are your bicycle projects, those are your hawk signal projects, those types of projects, kind of other. And the third one is one that we typically send to Compass and ITD about our state highway priorities. Usually 4 on there that we prioritize state corridors and overpasses. So that's kind of what's needed in a nutshell, again, in the next couple of months. So unless there's any initial comments, I do have copies that I'd like to, of last year's priorities. So this is from ACHD. This essentially, this first handout I'm going to send to you is the status of our project at ACHD currently in their program. And then I've got a couple of other maps. So I'm going to hand those out, and if you want to talk while I do that, that's fine with me. So.
Priorities. A lot of growth out there too.
And then you want to stay ahead of it.
Like roundabouts, but combination.
Roundabouts, yeah.
This one that way, and then the other one that way, those extras?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk after this meeting?
Or, I think commissioners, we could talk a little more in detail, but at least I could introduce it.
Okay. Yes, please.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, as those are going around, there's 2 other 11 by 17. So one of them is the level of service map, and we can kind of run through that. And then the final one is ACHD's prioritization or programming spreadsheet. So that shows, similar to the 8.5 by 11, but it's not just Meridian projects. That's all their projects that are in their queue, if you will, at ACHD. But that, again, those are Boise projects, those are Garden City projects, those are CUNA projects. They're all over the county. So the combined project prioritization just kind of gives you the cost benefit or adjusted cost benefit ratio on the far right-hand side. So you can see everything except for the politics that kind of goes into scoring a roadway project and what they think is worthy of their efforts. Now you got to balance all that, right? So cost plays into that. But you can see in the fifth column, the adopted 5-year work plan construction year, so you can kind of see the status of where it's at least for the top, 60 projects, 58 projects. So that's kind of what you have before you. Again, obviously it's your meeting, Mr. Chair, so however you want to, if you want to go about spending some time kind of walking through this any further. To me, the rest of it is fairly intuitive. If you want a quick refresher on the
A quick question.
Full
What's
service map.
the area of impact to the south? What's the border? Is it Columbia or is it Lake Hazel?
So, Mr. Chair, similar to, well, kind of all of our borders, it zigs and zags a little bit. I'm going to use a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So, this blue line is the city's area of impact line. So that's where we envision Meridian city limits to eventually go. So you can see it kind of zigs and zags. Lake Hazel from basically the Canyon County line, but then just east of Linder, it kind of stair steps down to Columbia and then does another loop down towards Hubbard, half a mile. Well, you can see it. That's our area of impact line. Same thing, again, kind of our Boise border. Generally, it's halfway between Cloverdale and Eagle Road, but as you go further north, city limits are even on the west side of Eagle Road, so it kind of zags over.
I have a general comment and food for thought, if you will. So over the last several years, as we've been looking at the street, road, construction priorities, and getting a sense of, as we grow in some of our recent discussions, it came more into focus. So I was at a meeting in November on the freight advisory. So federal law has asked each one of the states to conduct a freight advisory study. And Erica, or Ms. Bowen, excuse me, I was going to pull you in a bit on this. But the short of it is, Compass has been tasked with identifying what you would call freight corridors, where the freight currently is. I mean, it simply exists because you have farm to market, if you're thinking about that, and you have manufacturing facilities. Probably no surprise that there's freight corridors or freight hubs, if you will, located along the freeway and also along the train tracks. Seems to be kind of natural. But the question that came up at this meeting the other day was, in particular, they said, well, where is the state/county in the construction of a particular road? And I wished I could remember what that conversation was, because it reminded me of the discussions that the commission has had about 11-foot lane, 12-foot lanes, and some intersections, and coordinating traffic, and then lay on top of that a discussion that this Freight Advisory Committee is working towards what they call a model freight corridor ordinance. And as I understand it, this ordinance would give some tools to local planning agencies, city, county, to make considerations about how developments, be that a subdivision, the proximity to a road, proximity to a train track, and maybe some other issues. So that gives me a little more emphasis or a little more focus when I start looking at this, and I go back to that Freight Advisory Committee. I sit on it as an independent member, wearing a couple different hats, one with the Idaho Trucking Association as well. But any event, to give you a little bit of background, or why this takes on a little more emphasis for me, is will there be some recommendations on road design? And how is it that you can make recommendations to, be careful here, a highway district or the state highway about what they see to accommodate, if you will, the movement of freight? I can give you one example. A lot of concern is in the Nampa area where it's a highway that goes to the sugar beet factory. It crosses through Nampa and it goes through 3 highway districts. Historically, that's a road that moves a lot of freight. So you're building around it. I see things going on in Meridian the same way. So just out there on the radar is, will there be additional recommendations, whether that's in an ordinance, as to where freight corridors may be located? Looking ahead, I see a note here on compression brakes. We talked a little bit in the years past about a freight corridor or truck routes in the city of Meridian. Any event, just what I wanted to introduce is, so these priorities probably take on a little more importance for me, thinking about where it is that corridors may be located and restrictions that may be placed on developments as this community grows. And I know ITD, the gentleman, Jeff, Ms. Bowen, and I'm trying to think of his last name. Yes, right. So he's there quite, well, he's there every time, and I speak with him. So in any event, I just wanted to throw that out. There's to be some additional information come out this month, and then the next meeting, I believe, is in February. So I don't have all the information for this, or additional information to talk about this freight corridor or the ordinance or what the effect is. But just something to think about when we're reviewing and making recommendations. I think it's another aspect, because the Transportation Commission talks about the movement of people, the movement of freight, the movement of cars. Just wanted to reintroduce that concept. Yes?
Would you like for me to find out if Lisa Conan can give a presentation on that when you're talking about this?
I would welcome that, and I would hold that out to the Transportation Commission, because I think this, I think that would be beneficial to introduce this concept to other members of the commission that have no idea what I'm talking about.
I can check what month would be best, like next month.
Okay?
Yes.
Mr. Hood, can we accommodate that, or do we need to do a little more scheduling?
We absolutely, well, we probably can. Mr. Chair, we need to talk about the January meeting a little bit as date, and then I don't know Lisa's schedule, so we'll have to, assuming you choose a date for our January meeting that works with her schedule. I think that's the best date, though, would be January. Because again, we're going to be knee-deep into this by February, if not adopting it in February. So I think things that you're bringing up to be considered as part of this process, getting her here in January would be most beneficial. And the agenda for January, right now, it looks like that's what it's going to be, is priority lists. So I think that's related. So having her come and then spend the rest of the meeting, essentially, Sergeant Arnold obviously would still be invited as well with his regular update. But yeah, I think we could accommodate her if that's, if the stars align there.
If you would extend that invitation, we'll work on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, your comments made me just think of another tool that you all have to consider. You don't have to consider, but you have at your disposal to consider, and that is ACHD's master street map. We've talked about this, but we don't talk about it all that often. So I've pulled it up on your screen and sort of zoomed in a little bit. Again, it's county-wide, but the legend does designate some different corridors. So kind of to your point, we have industrial corridors, or we, the county, ACHD, has, you know, industrial corridors, corridors that are under study, commercial corridors. So we typically historically haven't gotten into too many of the details, and we have talked about 10 mile in particular, and 12-foot lanes, and truck routes, and those types of things. This map, though, is kind of where ACHD starts when it comes to building a project, is what does the master street map show for a cross-section. The companion document to this is what they call their Livable Streets Design Guide. So this says then in pictures, you know, what type of a roadway is it? Okay, you go find the cross-section then. Is it 10.5-foot lanes, or is it 12-foot lanes? Is it attached sidewalk? Is it a detached sidewalk? Are there center medians? Is access even a concern, or can people just have driveways wherever they want? Are there sidewalks or not? Are landscape buffers part of that? Anyways, it's contextual, basically, is the idea. This is kind of under the guise of complete streets. And again, the context of the adjacent street. So you can look at this, too, if you'd like, when you're going through this and go, are we getting a residential street, or are we getting a commercial street, or are we getting an industrial street? So the Livable Streets, this master street map and the Livable Streets Design Guide, if you wanted to get down to that level, you're certainly welcome to. We have a lot of residential arterials in Meridian, which we have a lot of residences, so that kind of makes some sense. But they're not all that. So again, you can look at some roads like 10 Mile or Overland that are mobility corridors. Okay, what does that mean? Look into that. And again, we historically haven't. We basically look at it, oh, there's a problem here, and there's a problem there. We need these problems fixed, but we don't get into the details of what cross-section does that look like to solve the problem. We can, you know, if we want to. And in fact, if you look at, you know, in the far right-hand column of the 8.5 by 11 that I gave you, additional project-specific miscellaneous city input. You know, if we look at this and we're like, and ACHD's plan is for a 5-lane roadway, and we say, you know what, we think a 4-lane roadway with, you know, a cycle track on either side makes the most sense. We could comment to them on that. So, just kind of giving you some options, or I guess additional tools in your toolbox if you want to use them. There's a couple more that you might find useful. So again, just while there's a little bit of a lull, Mr. Chair. So the Ada County Highway District Master Street Map, and the ACHD Livable Streets Design Guide. I'll see if I can even just pull that up real quick. So there's the cover page, you can see. And I'll just zoom to one to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. Maybe. This is a collector roadway, but so you get the idea of the right-of-way they need and what's contained within the right-of-way. Not necessarily asking you to go to this level, just saying if you want to. If you want to see what's the likelihood that this road will look like as it gets designed and constructed, this is where you'd go.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster.
if I can ask a couple questions here, and these are probably directed to Mr. Hood. So, Caleb, can you remind me here on this 8.5 by 11 City of Meridian request status for, and 2018 prioritization? So, as I recall in the past, if the projects have been programmed or funded, or I guess program and funded, we've typically dropped those from our list. So in looking at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 11, and then they go on to the next page and the next page after that. So if I recall, we've typically dropped those off of our priority list right away because they're already funded. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, no, I would request that we not do that.
Oh.
It would only be the projects that are, so again, we're talking about the 2019 to 2023. So anything that's now, we can take off the list in 18 because they've set their budget for this year, but they have not set it in the program for any of the next year. So yes, project 2 could come off the list because Pine is moving forward. That'll be in construction. By the time we send this list, that one will be awarded a bid to somebody.
Okay.
So number 2 could come off, but projects 1 and 4, they could say, oh, this isn't a priority for the city anymore. It's not a priority for us either.
Okay.
So they haven't invested enough in those. Keep them, so it's really good point, a good question though, on point is yes, the ones that have a 2018 CN year. And those are some of the things, again, if I had more time, I would have done for you.
Okay, so, yeah, thank you for that clarification. So 2018 or 2019, they can come off because they're already, we can't influence that anymore. So like number 2 and number
34.
34, yeah.
18.
And even,
Says 2019.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, even 20, I mean, it's a pretty high likelihood that it would stay there, but even 18, I would leave the 2019 projects
Okay,
myself.
Okay.
You know,
okay,
they're investing in it, they've got design, and they're gonna have right-of-way done by the end of this year, so they're probably gonna do that, but kinda risky, you know?
okay. No, thank you for that clarification. It's been a year since we did this, so
No, again, I appreciate the question. I'm sorry I don't want to make too many assumptions with this, but I don't want to waste a whole bunch of time telling you stuff you heard, 10 months ago.
yeah.
So,
Another question for you. Can you remind me, the programming notes column, are those, Caleb, your notes? Is that correct? Those are some commentary, I guess, from you. Is that correct?
so maybe just a clarification on the question. Are you talking the far right-hand column?
Yes. The column for programming notes.
Programming notes.
Second from the right.
8.5 by 11?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I see it. I was too far to the right in the blank space. No, those are ACHD comments
Okay,
from ACHD. So this is ACHD spreadsheet.
okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hopkins?
so based on that, so number 34, to be built in 2018, it looks funded just a long ways down the list. We would typically be taking that off the list?
Correct. This is the project Erica spoke about
Yep.
last month, that they're doing a little more additional work there at the intersection of Overland.
Okay.
And again, the thing to also look for is any new projects. So, this isn't all of the arterial roadways in Meridian, although we do have 62 roadways and intersection projects. So, we historically had 3 or 4 a year, somewhere in that neighborhood. So there may be some new ones we need to put on there. And if you do have a new one, where do you think it would fit? Is it at the very end and works his way through, or put it in the middle of the road? So yeah, Mr. Chair, just, I guess maybe didn't explain the homework very well, but just going back to the 8.5 by 11, we really need to fill out the first column and the last column. And we don't have to put anything in the last column if we don't want to. But it is taking this second column and looking at it for 2018, and if it's the same number, then it's the same number, moving everything up one, that would be easy and we're done. Or do we want to move them around? But it really is that first column that we need to fill, and then any other programming notes in the next couple of months. Last year, and last year we did do intersections and roadways 1 month, and then came back with community programs. I'd like to tackle both of these. Wait and see how many comments come in, and if there's a ton that we need to discuss in roadways and intersections, maybe rethink that. But I'm thinking we can do this all next month, is my hope.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can comment, I think I would concur with that and agree with that. I'd like to spend a few minutes on it today, and then most of the meeting tomorrow, and hopefully wrap it up. You know,
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Wow.
next year, how about that? Next year.
That's one extreme to another.
You know, many of us, so we'd be interested in having Commissioner Davis's input, but I think the rest of us were all staring at the same list last year. So I know I'm not going to propose any that jump from 50 to number 1 or anything like that. So, I think we can largely just move up the list, is my thought, for what that's worth, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so I've asked the schools to get me their requests by January 19th. So I won't have it by the January meeting, but if there's any that we feel are pressing, I can bring those into the February 19th meeting, the February meeting, if I think there's any that you would be interested in. And then you can just kind of amend it and tag those on.
Very good.
And just one question. So if we do have any recommendations, you want us to give those to you before the meeting?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, again, if you can, and let me apologize first, Commissioner, that you're kind of getting the short end of this stick and not doing the full spiel, hearing all about this. So I'm certainly willing to give you some more direction and instruction if needed. But yes, if everyone can please, the next 30 days or so, go through these and send me in advance of our meeting, approximately 10 days or so in advance of our meeting, your comments. Then I can compile whatever I have and send back out with the packet a draft 2018 ranking. And then that's what we'll use to discuss amongst all of you at that meeting. If you don't do your homework, you can still have an opportunity to participate in that, but you won't have the initial input into where things go up or down. So I can't give you a hard and fast date at this time because we need to talk about when our January meeting date is going to be. But again, approximately 10 days before that is when I'd request those, so I can have some time to compile that and then shoot that back to you at least a few days before your meeting so you can. So.
Okay, so we have our homework for the next meeting. Any further discussion?
Our Christmas homework.
Christmas homework.
You don't get 2 weeks off. Okay, item 5C is completed for today. 5E, established a January meeting date.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if everyone has looked at their calendar. January 1 is a holiday, so, and that's the first Monday of the month. So obviously, we're not going to meet then. So, yeah, if you can all pull out your handheld devices or calendars or otherwise and figure out a meeting. I guess maybe as you're looking at January, we just mentioned having Lisa come from Compass and obviously do the worst case. If we can't make that happen, I think, again, we could get this all done in one meeting. We could probably do it during the February meeting, if necessary. I think January and then ratifying it in February probably makes the most sense, but if we just can't get a quorum or whatever on 2nd or the 8th or whatever date you guys want to try to do, I don't think it's the end of the world. Gives you a little more time to do your homework too, so.
So is the 8th open for discussion, or are you looking at something besides the 8th?
I think the 8th would be a good day.
I like the 8th.
Okay. Joe, then.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not available on the 8th. That may make you want to meet that day, but
Hey,
I like it.
bonus.
My vote is for the 8th.
yeah. Who needs enemies when you have friends like these, right?
All seriousness aside,
I mean,
the 15th is a holiday,
I think we look at the 2nd or the 8th is kind of your,
so are we thinking a Tuesday meeting?
Is this available?
So, Mr. Chair, with whatever date is chosen, I will need to check with the city clerk to make sure it's available. Tuesday, the 2nd, there will be a meeting here at 6, so we would definitely, I mean, we're trying to wrap things up, and we've been pretty good. We haven't gone past 5:30 in a while. But I think we could probably use this right before if you did choose the 2nd, but we would definitely have to be out of here, you know, at the very latest by 5:45.
And would that be the same consideration for the 9th? That city council?
Actually, the 9th, this room would not be available because that's a council workshop, so they start at 3 o'clock on the second Tuesday of each month, so this room. So, but that being said, I think if you pick a date and a time, I'll see if this room's available. If it's not, we have other conference rooms that we can notice this meeting for if this room is not available. So I want to get as many of you possible participating, and then we can provide on the notice where that room is, and hopefully it's here, but by chance, if we need to meet somewhere else, we do have some other conference rooms. So.
Mr. Hood should be familiar with the bylaws, but would it help if we moved to 3 o'clock instead of 3:30 on the 2nd?
Why do you,
no. I got life, work.
And Mr. Chairman, for what it's worth, I'm not available anywhere between from the 2nd to the 8th. The 9th I'm available, 9th on, but not the 2nd to the 8th.
You're difficult.
I know. New Year's I could be here, but not the 2nd through the 8th.
Well, you have a lot to bring to the table, so maybe we need to work around your schedule.
Well, do what you need to do. So.
Mr. Lewis, you had something to say.
Well, Mr. Lancaster just answered my question, you know, if he's not available either day, then I guess that it's moot.
I would say that we shoot for the 8th, which is a Monday.
Tuesday.
That's 7th, well, crap.
The 8th
Oh,
is
8th is Monday, I'm sorry.
I would say we shoot for the 8th and request that Mr. Lancaster have his input into Caleb before the meeting.
That I can do.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so is that a motion, Mr. Hall?
That's a motion.
Or the motion is to hold our January meeting on Monday, January 8th at 3:30.
Second.
And a second from Mr. Leslie. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So, Mr. Hood, January 8th,
3:30.
3:30.
And pencil it in for this room, but I will confirm that, or if this room's not available, you'll definitely hear from me. But
Okay,
plan on meeting here.
all right. So, Mr. Lancaster, dare we ask where you're going to be on the 8th?
I will be in Washington DC. I'll be in airports that day,
All
actually,
right,
on
so
the
you're
8th.
going to go back, you're going to go back to the swamp.
Yeah, I'm going, I'm going to the swamp, yes.
All right, all right. Okay, 5E, completed. 5F, staff communications, Mr. Hood.
Mr. Chair, just, I don't need to read these to you, and I know at least some of you have read this already because you were talking about the signal there on 10 Mile, just north of I-84. But I did, first of all, just wanted to call to your attention that you do have a vacancy on the Transportation Commission right now. Vincent Coots did take a position with the mayor's office, and I'm the only, well, Mr. Barrett as well, and I guess Mr. Arnold falls into that too, but we're the only ones that have the pleasure of serving on the commission, so he can't be an appointed member on your board sitting up there, but you may see him from time to time, as he's generally charged with maintaining, if you will, the city's strategic plan. So he may come to a meeting here in the future, but he is working for the city now, so in a different capacity. So he resigned since your last meeting. So if you know of anyone, I know that they closed on last Friday, the 1st, was kind of when their initial soft cutoff was for new members that they told the public. If you have anybody that you think would be good, have them get a hold of me ASAP, because I know the mayor wants to fill that vacancy, but if we need to put someone else in that pool, please let me know right away. The second thing on there is just more for an FYI, and then again, you already heard about the, oh, also, Mr. Morris is leaving. He participated with you in an ex officio role, and his last day with VRT was last Friday, so I just thought you might be curious about that. And you already talked about the signal. So, yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't necessarily have anything further to add on that item.
Okay. Any further items to bring up on 5F? Okay. So, item 5 is completed. 6, future meeting topics. We've extended an invitation for freight advisory. We'll see how that works. Compression brakes, Valley Connect. So Mr. Morris was the contact on the senior bus.
Harvest.
Harvest bus, okay. Probably too soon to know who his replacement is?
I saw Rhonda walked out just a few minutes ago,
Right.
but yeah, I imagine. So in the interim, David, I think it was, what's his name? Pedersen is going to be taking his, taking on some of his responsibilities that way in the interim until they can, I assume they're backfilling
Okay,
Todd's position. But Rhonda, I think, and some of the others, Stephen Hunt and maybe some others are going to be doing the Valley Connect 2.0 item. So we should be able to press on there.
Linder Village project update, you have parentheses February.
The reason that I added that is it got continued to the January city council meeting, so I can't remember the exact date, 16th or sometime middle of January, the council will be hearing that, and you all asked for an update. Mary Call, and I forgot her name, but she was here and addressed you with some of the concerns, traffic concerns and development concerns with the project there at Chinden and Linder.
So the
Across from Fred
January city council meeting, that the development plan is still on for discussion and a vote by city council.
Correct.
What date is that?
Again, Mr. Middle of January.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I'm thinking it's the 16th is what my memory, but I don't have that agenda right in front of me, so if you're
Okay.
watching at home, please look it up on the clerk's website. But I think it's the 16th.
Okay.
In February, I'll let you know how that played out.
All right, very good. Communities in motion, master mobility map, comprehensive plan update. Mr. Hood, any further discussion on serving on the subcommittee on the comprehensive plan update?
Maybe just a little bit. Yeah, I think, so I've shared once, and I actually go back next Tuesday to the city council again to provide some more details. I have not been shot down with the concept we discussed kind of in advance of the VRT tour we did in September, and having this group largely serve, although I could see us pulling in a couple of other members of the community. For instance, Jack McGee mentioned wanting to also be involved in future projects like that, and he's got some background in working on comp plans and those types of things. So bringing in a few others, it's not just the Transportation Commission as a steering committee to work on transportation elements of the comp plan, but again, having 6 or 7 subcommittees that all are looking at a specific element of the comp plan, I think is kind of where we're going. The timeline, going to share it with Mr. Kavanagh, I guess, a little bit early. But we would hope in March to come back to the council with the scope of work and a draft contract and budget for them to approve, and then begin working as soon as we can negotiate with whoever the preferred consulting team is, later this spring. So, about an 18-month process. So, more to come on that. That's what I
Okay,
know now.
all right, and 6G pedestrian signal at Meridian and Broadway, that's still an ongoing task.
Yeah, if you recall from last month, Mr. Martin was going to place up the recording device, I can't remember what they even called it, and analyze,
Cameras.
yeah, some cameras basically, and do a compliance study with some cameras, and then report back. So it's on the bottom, but I imagine it may leapfrog some of these other ones, but I don't know when he's going to actually have that done.
Any additions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hopkins?
I have a question, Caleb. We talked about, I think, 2 months ago about asking ACHD about a priority corridor on Locust Grove. Have you heard anything back from that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, it may have been one of the meetings you missed maybe, but they did respond in their letter back to us talking about that, and I thought I included that in your packet, or maybe it was even our letter that went out. Maybe it was our letter that went from the mayor, that's what it was. It was our letter that it got included to ACHD. I know practically they didn't actually include it as a priority corridor, but they received it and will evaluate it. I don't know if they sent anything in writing back, but they didn't change and include more of Locust Grove.
Anything else to get on our future agendas? Okay. Item 6 completed. 7, next meeting date, we have that for January 8th at 3:30. Before asking a motion to adjourn, anything else to discuss?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
we're here.
okay. Councilman,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for participating with our live stream. We had 1 viewer during today's meeting, so thanks for your willingness to participate in that process.
This was live?
You weren't the viewer, huh?
very good. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're out of here.
Nice Christmas, everybody.
So, Mr. Wesley,
Merry Christmas.
just kind of interesting.